The eyes of the world on one room in Washington. You're looking at live pictures of it right now. This is at the Capitol, where just a couple hours from now, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford will testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Blasey Ford says she was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh 36 years ago. He denies that. So someone who will not testify, who was not invited to speak at all, is Deborah Ramirez, who says that Judge Kavanaugh thrust his genitals in her face at a drunken party at Yale and caused her to touch his genitals as she pushed him away. Kavanaugh denies these allegations. Joining us now is John Clune. He is the attorney for Deborah Ramirez. John, thanks so much for being with us. Yesterday, the president said they're giving the women a major chance to speak. Women, plural. As far as I know, Professor Ford is the only one who will be testifying today. Is your client being given the opportunity to be heard?
She has not been given the opportunity to testify today. She's not been invited. I don't think the president knew what he was talking about when he made that remark.
Sarah Sanders, who was the White House press secretary moments ago, had this to say. Let me play it for you.
I don't question the stories, but I certainly question the tactics that these individuals were more than willing to give interviews to the Washington Post, to the New Yorker, but refused to sit down with the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Now, your client, Debbie Ramirez, did speak to the New Yorker. Has she refused to sit down with the Senate Judiciary Committee?
We can't even talk to the Senate Judiciary Committee. So, no, she's not refused to sit down with them. We try to get them on the phone, and they don't schedule phone calls with us. When we had a phone call scheduled, the majority party didn't show for the phone call. So, no, she's certainly not refused to do that. But the thing that's important is that this is something that actually needs to be investigated by the FBI, not the Senate Judiciary Committee. They are not qualified to do this investigation, and no disrespect to Rachel Mitchell and the work that she's going to do today. But this is something that goes in the bailiwick of the FBI, and they're the only folks that can really do an investigation and investigate any of the corroborating witnesses that are available.
I know you want the FBI to be involved. It doesn't look like that will happen. But just to be crystal clear on this, your client would get on the phone with the Senate Judiciary Committee today. She would talk to the Republican staffers and the Republican investigators on this committee today.
No, she would get on the phone with the FBI today. She would meet with the FBI now if they made that request. But the Senate Judiciary Committee is not suited to do this kind of investigation, and she's not going to cooperate with this kind of political theater.
Oh, okay. So to that extent, then, Sarah Sanders is not wrong. Your client will not sit down with the committee insofar as it's not at a public hearing.
Unless they figure out some other way to have a trauma-informed, real sexual assault investigation into what happened, no. The only way that I can see that would happen is be through the FBI. If there's another way, we'd be happy to discuss that with the Senate Judiciary Committee. But the fact that they won't even have a phone call with us gets in the way from having any kind of meaningful conversation.
But when you say phone call with us, you mean you. In this case, you don't want her to have a phone call with the committee, correct?
No, I'm saying if there's another way for them to engage in this process that will be a meaningful investigation, they need to talk to us about it.
Okay, but not Senate investigators. You're precluding the possibility that it is Senate investigators.
And I'm precluding the possibility unless they have the ability to explain to us how that would be a meaningful, trauma-informed process. What's going on today, and again, no disrespect to Rachel Mitchell, but this is not a real investigation into a sexual assault case. And she's not going to engage in that kind of process.
Brett Kavanaugh says that he and Debbie Ramirez, your client, had a friendly relationship but were not friends. Is that accurate?
I don't know that I'd call it a friendly relationship. I mean, I think that they were acquaintances like a lot of people are acquaintances in college. They had common friends. That's about how I would describe it.
One other thing Brett Kavanaugh has said, and I want to read you this statement about the claim made by your client is, this did not happen. I've never done anything like that. The New York Times couldn't corroborate this story and found that she was calling around to classmates trying to see if they remembered it. It sounds like an orchestrated hit to take me out. That's what it sounds like. Now, the New York Times has since said they didn't run with the story because they didn't have an interview with Debbie Ramirez. Your client chose to speak to the New Yorker, not the New York Times. But to the claim that your client was calling around to classmates to see what happened, explain that.
Yeah, so, I mean, Debbie Ramirez was very, very careful and very deliberate about what information she was putting out there. This is something that happened 35 years ago. And so she was very careful about talking to other people and seeing if there's any way that her recollection of certain events was inconsistent with theirs, if she was misremembering anything. And so she wanted to make sure that when she spoke to the New Yorker and when she gave that information, it was something that she actually felt confident was accurate.
But the claim that Kavanaugh and some people supporting him seem to be making is that when she was making these calls, she didn't remember it. She was trying to have her friends tell her that they did.
So what is important in any kind of conversation like this, and Debbie was very careful about this, is she did not want to suggest her memories to any other individuals. So she was very nondescript. I don't think she even identified Brett Kavanaugh by name. She just wanted to know, do you recall anything about an incident like this occurring while we were in college? And so that may have come off as though she didn't remember anything, but the reality was she didn't want to suggest her own memories onto somebody else before they were able to give their feedback.
You know, it's interesting. We're going to hear from Professor Christine Blasey Ford in just a few hours. We just heard a soundbite from Julie Swetnick, who is another woman who has accused Judge Kavanaugh in the last 24 hours. We know your client's not going to testify today because she hasn't been allowed to, not invited to testify in the open hearing. You say she's not going to speak to Senate investigators. Is it possible she'll choose to speak publicly in the days before the Senate will vote on the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh?
It's possible, and I know that you indicated that it doesn't seem like the FBI is going to do the investigation, but that's really what she's holding out for. Like I said, she would speak to them today if they were inclined to call her.
Again, I'm not sure the FBI thing is going to happen based on what we've seen, but again, she would be willing to maybe do an interview or speak publicly in the next few days?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that's not something that we're planning on doing.
Okay.
The issue is to deal with, what's going on with Senate Judicial and if there's going to be any formal investigation into what happened.
All right, John Clune, attorney for Debbie Ramirez. We appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.